back in 1954 when we were the Malayan Nature Society. Ultimately, Singapore became a sovereign state, and we had to separate ourselves from the Malayan Nature Society and become an entity in our own right, Singapore Nature Society. We have grown from a hobby type of club, which involves, people doing bird watching, appreciating flora and fauna on a casual basis, to one of advocacy and activism, and that is what the sort of thing that we're doing today. So what do we want to do? What we want to achieve is we want to drive policy changes. We want to influence the government in its conservation policy and its development policy. We want to engage in conservation science. That means we contribute to the process of science. We want to promote the sustainable practices. Probably the most famous one was Sungai Buloh Wetlands Reserve. So we were instrumental in establishing the Sungai Buloh Wetlands Reserve up in the north of Singapore, from the early days when it was just prawn ponds, today where it actually has nature reserve status, and it's very well managed by the National Parks Board. How controversial it was. The government proposed to, they're building it now, but they're building a railway line straight across Singapore, and that railway line crossed the Central Nature Reserve, right? And in the publication in March 2013, it was announced in the Straits Times we would have this line running across the nature reserve, and there was no indication whether it was going to be above ground or below ground. The whole of the nature community lit up, and there was a lot of opposition to that. The Nature Society developed a position paper, and so there were two things going on. One is the public were going crazy, and the other thing is the Nature Society became active. But there was a difference between what happens in the public domain and what happens in the Nature Society domain. The public were very concerned that there was a line drawn across a map, so that's an ideological problem. We take a more objective view of things, and what we saw was that as a tunnel, because the Cross Island line was going to be was intended to become a tunnel that crossed the nature reserve in the southern part, in the Macricci area, and this is a zoomed in section, and the alignment they proposed went straight through primary forest and important stream habitat. And our objection to this was that when you build a tunnel, you have to do soil investigation. When you do soil investigation, you have to bring in borehole machines, and these borehole machines weigh 3 tons, and you have to take a borehole every 15 meters. So if you did that across here, you'd have a highway running across the nature reserve, but you'd not only have a highway, you'd also have roads running in, and the roads would eventually erode and bring silt into the stream systems and clog up the stream systems. So the Nature Society doesn't just complain, we provide alternatives. So whenever we want to oppose something or are not happy with something in the development, we'll propose an alternative. Here's the Cross Island Line LTA proposed alignment, and we proposed an alternate alignment around here, which goes around Lornie Road. And that alternate alignment would have saved all of the problems that could have come from building across here. And ultimately, it was quite unpalatable from an engineering point of view to put an alignment around here, because underneath Lornie Road you have power, gas, sewer, water. You have deep tunnel sewer. It's very difficult. It would have been, from an engineering point of view, very difficult. And of course you had residential areas here where you would have the tunnel underneath people's houses, and the vibration would have given them a bit of a thrill during the night time. So here, what was sorted out was that the alignment was changed from this straight through alignment to this bendy alignment. And this bendy alignment follows a motorable road that runs through the nature reserve. And we were able to have the borehole machines move along that road without having to clear any forest. And then the result is a slightly longer alignment with some curves in it, but it solved the problem of destroying the nature reserve forest. So that as a result of us proposing this, the pressure that this brought on the agency to not use this alignment caused this modified and improved alignment. The boreholes were done in 2017, the year 2017, and then now they're starting to build that tunnel. We're quite happy with that outcome. So that's a nature society was very influential. Here's one of the solutions that we have in Singapore. Here's the Western Catchment. Here's Bukit Timah Nature Reserve. And in between it we have Tengah Forest Town, which is a fairly recent innovation. And we pressured the government to make a forest corridor through this development. So we have a 100-metre wide forest corridor running through here. And we have, through Bukit Batok, we have a number of forested hills that are going to be converted into nature parks, and that includes Bukit Batok Hillside Park, Bukit Batok Central, and over here we have Bukit Batok Nature Park, and then here Bukit Timah Nature Reserve. So there is a path through here that we can establish connectivity. Now connectivity, what does it really mean? We have roads running through the middle of it, so our connectivity doesn't suit the terrestrial fauna like the pangolins and things that need to run around on the ground. But it does benefit birds and bats. So birds and bats can move through here. Now, what does connectivity mean? It does not mean that I have a straw-headed bulbul here who has a family on this side and a family on that side. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that the straw-headed bulbul will have a family here, and that family the offspring will move along this corridor and establish themselves, and then they'll have offspring that establish themselves, and in the opposite is happening in the opposite direction, and then the DNA mixes along that corridor. Okay. This is the URA, Urban Redevelopment Authority's long-term plan for Singapore into tidal areas, and some of the interesting things come up when you look at this. This is the Mandai and Mudflats. It is now being converted into a nature park, but in the long-term plan, and the government says, hey, we might need to reclaim the mudflats. Have you come over here to check Java? You know about Check Java? Yeah. Pulau Ubin? Yeah. Even that's earmarked. That's chopped for reclamation. This development of Tekong, this development of Tekong affects us because ultimately the military sites, training sites on the mainland many of them will move to Tekong, and those military sites which are often forested are going to be up for development. So we're very concerned about that. If you come down here, you have some coral reefs down here, which are, there's Pulau Semakau, coral reefs around here. You have Pulau Busing, coral reefs around here, that are up for grabs, that are also chopped for reclamation. We're concerned about that. You have also this along here. Who's heard of Long Island? Yes, everybody's heard of Long Island. It's the most recent thing. And Long Island is here because there's a potential through climate change, sea level rise, that we will lose our house. Okay, if you live in this area here, this whole area up until Agamokio, Hougang, those sort of areas. So here's the problem, is that over the years we've been monitoring sea level rise, and sea level rise has been since 1980. We can see a steady increase in sea level rise, and then we can project that out, and we can say, okay, even on current trajectory, without any sea level, without any global warming, our projection is that the sea level will continue to rise. With sea level, with global warming, that sea level rise could increase, and what can happen next is that, as I said before, you can lose your house. So this red area are all the areas that can be flooded once the sea level rises up around about 1 metre. So what are we going to do about it? And the only solution we can have is to form bunds at the critical places to stop the water from getting into the country and flooding us out. But the worst place is down here. Okay, so what are we going to do about that? Hang on, I'll come back to that thought. I mentioned the Mandai Mudflats earlier, and this is a map of the Mandai Mudflats. This is the Sungai Buloh Nature Reserve, or Wetlands Reserve, and this is the Mandai Mudflats. This means when the tide goes out, there's mud. And where there's mud, there's worms. And where there's worms, there's bird feed. So what happens is, we have this Asian-Australasian migration pathway, which passes through Sungai Buloh. Okay, so we are hosting migrant birds from Russia heading down to Australia and New Zealand for the summertime, or the winter, in the northern winter. And our problem is that they come and rest here at Sungai Buloh, And if you zoom down into what's going on at Sungai Buloh, is that the birds are nesting in Sungai Buloh, but when the tide goes out, they're coming over to the Monday mudflats to dig the worms out of the mud, and that's their food. That's how they survive. So Monday mudflats plus Sungai Buloh Nature Reserve is a single unit from an ecological point of view. So the problem's going to be if the government has chopped this for redevelopment in 10 years' time. A nature park only has tenure for 10 years, then it gets reviewed. This could go, and if this goes, it'll spoil this. So we've got our eye on that ball. If the government tried to rescind the Monday Medflats Nature Park and recover that land or reclaim that land, then we will be there to object to that. As I said before, we don't just complain about things. We give solutions, and what we see here is the Monday Mudflat solution for sea level rise. When the sea level rises, and you watch this blue stuff here because this is the current sea level. Sea level rise is currently 0. This is 50 centimetre rise. A little bit less mudflats available. 100 centimetre rise, we basically lost our mudflats. Once we lose our mudflats, the birds landing at or wintering over in Sungai Buloh Nature Reserve cannot feed here. Okay, so there's an issue there. And of course the water can keep on going up, and the water can start eating into the mangroves. Right, mangroves already live within the tidal range, but if you get too much water over the mangroves, some of them will die out. What is the mitigation strategy? So here's the part where we provide a solution. We propose a solution to the government. What can we do about this problem of sea level rise and its effect on the mangroves, its effect on the mudflats, and its effect on the feeding ground of the migrant birds in Sungai Buloh Wetlands Reserve? What we propose is to fortify the mudflats, and we fortify it with silt dredged from the reservoirs. So the reservoirs accumulate silt because of the erosion that goes on. We can dredge the reservoirs, we can fortify, we can raise the level of the mudflat so that as the sea level rises, you still have mudflats. Even after 100 centimetre, 1 metre sea level rise, you still have mudflats for the birds to eat. So there's our solution to the government. And if the sea level keeps rising, we lose the mangroves, and then we can further fortify, because we don't know how much sea level rise is going to ultimately be, we can further fortify the mudflats and replant mangroves. Back here is the bund that PUB is proposing to hold the water back. And where does the silt come from? The silt comes from careless construction activity. So all of these developments like Tanga Forest Town, the Safety Urban Warfare Centre, the Monday Rainforest Park developments, they all do not manage construction site drainage very well, and you end up with a lot of silt load running in here, Jurong River, over here the Jurong Lakes, down here some more of the Jurong Sungai Pangsua type of drainage. So all of this turret colour is coming from poor construction practice. And so while we complain a lot about poor construction practice silting up our waterways, which is an impact on biodiversity, we also look like we're going to benefit from it because that silt ended up in the reservoir. We can dredge it and we can fortify our mudflats. Okay, so there's our solution. Long Island, so we'll go and visit this. This is how you lose your house, okay, by flooding over the years. And if we don't do something about it, we're in trouble. You know, even the water level rises a bit. Whenever there's heavy rain, it's just going to back up, right? So you don't even have to be flooded out to be affected by sea level rise. So the government gave an initial solution. A seed solution was published in the newspaper by the government, and they said, this is what we're thinking about. Okay, but we're open to ideas. Okay, so Nature Society has some ideas. And we have made a proposal to the government, but don't worry, it's not a marriage proposal. It's a proposal that will look like this instead of this. Okay, so our solution is to recognise that you do need to have urban and infrastructure on this site, on this reclaimed land, but what we want is more curved frontage to control the currents. So when the tides go up and down, the currents go in and out very aggressively, and we want to control that. We want to create some curve, what we call curvy-worvy beaches, new scientific term. We want to have some mangroves. We can't why do we want to have mangroves? The reason why is because we've lost a lot of mangroves and we want to build mangroves into the solution. So we can balance out the previous loss of mangroves due to land reclamation and development. So these inlets here, these green squares, we'll look at them in more detail later. That's where we're going to put the mangroves. We can't put mangroves along the front, it won't work. Not possible. Out here, we have artificial coral reefs. And I'll show you how we're going to achieve those. So there's quite a lot of difference between what the seed design is and what the Nature Society design is. We're proposing nature-based solutions for this long island. So this is the coral spawn from the southern island. So once a year, the coral releases spawn, and that gets carried along the currents along the east coast of Singapore. And all we have to do is have rock buns as these artificial reefs, and the coral spawn will land there and self-attach to the rock, and then the coral will develop over the time. We don't have to do anything special. This is the flight path from Changi Airport, so this end of the development has to be left undeveloped. So opportunity for parks and nature parks in that area. You can't have HDB here because the planes coming in are like 45 metres above the ground. So they come in at 3 degrees. This is the port. These are the anchorages. So one of the objections that the government might have to our proposal is that we're taking up too much of the anchorages. And anchorages are economically important for Singapore. So we might find some resistance there, but it's okay. We'll just bring the pressure. Always bring pressure. Always ask for more than what you think you can get. Okay, so that's what we did for Cross Island Line. We asked for the Lornie Road option, but we got something that was acceptable. If we didn't put that pressure there in the first place, we'd get nothing. Right, that's the negotiation tactic that we have. So here, our negotiation tactic is take up more space than what we probably can expect to result in. But by proposing to take up more space, we bring some pain. We bring some pain to the designers and to the different government agencies that are involved here. Our design is all about understanding the engineering of land reclamation. And so we have, over here is the East Coast Park. Here, this is a cross section of here we have the Long Island. And if I was to go, you watch these blue lines here. See these blue lines? Watch them. That's the sea level rise. There's overlap. So today we have so much low tide, high tide, and in the future we'll have low tide and high tide. These will overlap, and we play on that to manage the elevation of the landmass as well as the coral reef. Of course, there's a vertical exaggeration in this diagram. So that's a technical design. Here's a bit of a closer look at how we manage the mangroves. So over here we have these inlets, and this is looking down, and this is the current low tide, and this is the future low tide. How much will the water go in here? How much will the water go in there? If I click the next one, we've got current middle tide, future middle tide. So you see how mangrove inlet is being managed so it works today and it also works tomorrow. So we had to calculate the slopes and the elevations very carefully in our proposal. Current mid tide, future mid tide. So this is a 3/4 tide. You can see that today at the 3/4 tide we've got our mangrove inlets working probably about half, and in future full. I go to the final current high tide, future high tide. You can see that our mangrove inlet is fully occupied with water at high tide in the future. And what's going on here, here's a cross section of those mangrove inlets. This is the current situation, low tide, high tide, and mangroves are sitting in here within the tidal range. We plant those mangroves, we reclaim the land, we plant the mangroves. We manage some technical aspects of soil character by making sure that this water doesn't seep through by having a marine clay layer along here. We think about, okay, we have engineering thinky. So there's the future tide range, and we have the slope of these banks such that the mangroves can creep up. So as the sea level rises, the mangroves can up the bank. And for that reason, it takes up a bit of space. I'm coming to the end. This is our design for the artificial coral reefs. So we have a rock bund. We have the reclaimed land. It's 20 metres from the current seabed, from the current sea level down to the seabed at this point, 20 metres deep. So we have to reclaim all of this land with the normal land reclamation process. We put a rock bund in and we leave a lagoon, and then we have another mound in the middle made of sand, which is our desert island. And here, current low tide, some water will seep into our lagoon. Current high tide, our lagoon will fill up with water. We still have the island, some palm trees. Okay, our lagoon has water in it. And future high tide, we just have the island exposed, right? And that island can have picnic facilities and camping facilities. It's quite big. And so that's our proposal that we've given to the government. Now, what we don't say is, we don't say it must be like this. We say, here are some ideas we'd like you to consider in your design of Long Island. So that's the way we position it. We don't stand there and demand things. We participate in the process. So that's what we do. And